a thing that I really want to talk with you about is Nova and how that happened.
Yes, we worked on that. It was nuts. We were leaving the office in the middle of the night every night. The press was there all the time. They would call first thing at 6:00 in the morning to see what was going on. It is the largest consumer bankruptcy in the post-war period. People were left with telling us, I can't eat. I can't, I'm getting kicked out of my apartment. And, we would be negotiating with what was left of the company at that time to keep people in their apartments.
Welcome back to another episode of the Inside Japan podcast. I'm Charlie, and today I'm fortunate enough to be speaking with Dennis Tesolat, the General Secretary of the General Union here in Japan. We're going to talk about some of your legal rights as a foreigner working in Japan, the university system, and some of the big cases that are making changes to Japan's laws today. I hope you enjoy and learn a lot from this conversation, and please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes if you're enjoying this fortnightly podcast. Let's jump straight into the conversation. Dennis, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I've been really looking forward to it.
Yeah, fantastic. So I don't know all that much about unions. I had a union when I was working at the international school here in Tokyo. But if you're, say, for example, you're a foreigner working in some small school or an independent kindergarten or something like that, is it worth joining a union? Is that something that you can do? And, what do you do to kind of get started on that?
Well, basically, the way the trade union law works here in Japan is that even one person has the right to join a union on their own and has the right to collective bargaining, and the employer has all the same duties, whether it's a union that covers everybody in the company or just one person. A lot of our members aren't from, we have a big group in the big companies in the language schools, but then we have a big group that are, like you said, independent kindergartens, a language school with 3 teachers. And even for them, this is what they say to me anyways, because I asked them, why did you join? It's, and a lot of people join basically for the fact that, one, they appreciate the advice simply that's on the website and things like that, and they feel that they want to contribute to that. And 2, they feel that they, they're union members, they can call up, get good advice whenever they want. And if there is a problem, the last one is sort of like the insurance clause. If there is a problem, they know that we'll contact the employer. And, and usually it's simple things. It's, the unemployment insurance forms haven't been given in. The pay wasn't paid exactly because someone got excited. Someone maybe quit their job too early and they're penalizing them, 20,000 yen. Problems like that. Often when people are quitting is where the problems come in.
Yes, I had a problem with that when I quit a job. It was a job that was completely different from what was advertised. And so I ended up having, hours and hours of travel out to these super rural schools that I had no idea how to get home from sometimes. Like I had to get a taxi home once and he refused to pay for it. The owner of the school refused to pay for it. So I ended up quitting the job and he refused to give me the Taishoku Shomeisho, the certificate of quitting your company.
Yes.
And when I went to renew my visa, they said, you need this form. And I said, I've asked him for it several times and he just refused to do it. And I ended up having to get a lawyer to send him a letter saying, you need to give this piece of paper, otherwise we'll do something about it. And then he sent it. But I am sure a union would be able to help with that easily as well.
And often that's one of the things that we end up having to ask for is the Taishoku Shomeisho. And it's very interesting is because, people get too excited at the end, I think. They feel personally, this guy quit on me and now I'm gonna get him. And our feeling about quitting your job is like this. You should try to follow the contract. And the employer should try to follow the contract, because often people quit when the employer promised a bunch of things that never materialized in the end, and then they quit. So we feel that if things are going well, give the notice as per the contract. But technically, actually, once you've had one renewal, you only technically have to give 2 weeks to resign from your job, regardless of what the contract says. And we try to tell employers, listen, isn't it better that someone tells you with advance notice, knowing that they're not going to get punished, as opposed to calling you from the airport that day, But if you're the kind of employer who has a reputation of punishing people for quitting their jobs outside of the contract, then you're going to get people quitting on you suddenly. You know, so which do you prefer?
Right. So what do we do when an employer actually does something wrong that's going to affect a teacher's either their livelihood or their working conditions? Like, is there any point in going to the Labor Standards Board about that? Is there anything they can do about things like working conditions?
Sadly enough, the Labor Standards Office is, a bit of a disappointment. And it's not because the people at the Labor Standards Office aren't interested in doing their jobs or, are lazy or nothing like that. It's the way the system is set up, where often, let's take, for example, unpaid wages. You leave your job and they deduct you 100,000 yen because you quit early. You go to the Labor Standards Office, the Labor Standards Office knows employer can't do that. 100%. They're not going to argue with anybody about that. And they will call the employer. When the employer refuses to pay, often what they say, not just to foreigners, because we get calls from Japanese people who say they just left the Labor Standards Office, is they basically tell people, well, if they won't pay you, we could prosecute them, but prosecuting them won't get your money. So really, what's the point?
Wow. Why is that? Why doesn't prosecution work? Is there like some legal problem in place, or is that just because the schools don't have obligations to actually pay you if they lose the court case?
If they're prosecuted, violations of the labor standard law are treated as criminal prosecutions. So you're prosecuted, and that just means you violated the labor standards law and you take whatever punishment is there. You don't have to then make amends and follow and do what the punishment is. You broke the law, so you get the penalty. Not that you have to give the guy back the 100,000 yen.
Oh, wow. So it's not like, I think I guess in the US or in the UK, that would be civil versus criminal.
Yes.
So if you violate the law, it's a criminal matter, but not a civil matter. So there's no damages due.
Yes. So in this case here, it's actually, it's treated like regular prosecution, and, it takes a lot of work to do prosecution, and you have to have a lot of backup. And if the Labor Standards Office were to prosecute everybody in this country who didn't follow the labor standards law,
they'd be very busy.
The jails would be full,
Okay, so at what point then would a union step in? When would that be a useful step?
Actually, probably before going to the Labor Standards Office, dealing through the union is probably the better way. And if we have to use the Labor Standards Office, then we can guide people on how to use the Labor Standards Office in a more effective way, and to let the Labor Standards Office know someone's watching you, and I think we get better results that way, right? And, we get calls from people who, we ask them, where did you hear about the union? A lot of people say, well, I went to a lawyer, and the lawyer suggested that the union is probably actually the quickest way to deal with the problem. So lawyers who say, basically, trade union rights are very strong in Japan. So a union has a lot of rights that, you as a private person doesn't have, and employers react accordingly to that, right? They, often people say, no, they treat me terribly, and they won't answer you, but they answer us because they know there's no sense. There's no sense in not answering. They don't do things correctly, then we end up in the labor commission, and then it's more money and time for them. So
I wonder as much as well, like if there are people who, they want to cause problems with their previous employer, whether they have some kind of resentment or something, and they might contact a union or the Labor Standards Bureau and ask for some kind of, punishment on their previous employer. So how do you figure out who's doing that and what to do with them?
Well, one thing is we can't punish anybody. So, for us, it's just not a thing to do. And, if someone leaves a job and they, have a very clear problem, they say they have, then we'll deal with it. Often we get calls from people who say, I've left this company. I just want to report them to you, that they do all these bad things. And I'm thinking, what do I do with it? I would think I have a file for this kind of stuff. I don't really, right? You're gone. You've left your job. Yeah. It's up to the people in that workplace now. But when people come with a problem, what we do usually with companies, especially like these smaller ones that we talked about before, is we send them a very simple document. We don't ask for collective bargaining off the bat, and we send them a very simple document. This person is a member of our union. They've joined now, because you have to join or we can't do anything anyways, right? They have said A, B, C, and D. Based on that, only on that, we believe A, B, C, D. Please investigate and get back to us. And often oddly enough, things really get settled like that. They, yeah, okay, we shouldn't have done that. Or hold on a second. They told you point A, B, C, and D, but they didn't tell you point E, F, G, and H. And they tell us point E, F, G, and H. And, then we have to sit down with the person and say, sorry, actually, the company's right.
Right. So it's kind of like a lighter touch. It's not always like jumping to the gun and going straight for some kind of prosecution or
no. People get this idea that, we're going to show up there in tanks and things like that. And it's something. 90% of the stuff that we resolve would probably make for the most boring podcast in the whole wide world.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not like all of those American legal dramas that we both enjoy watching. It's not like LA Law.
no, it's not like LA Law. It's not usually like like movies like Fist with Sylvester Stallone or anything like that. It's very much, especially in the language industry where we are well known. Employers talk to us and they try to resolve problems. Most places don't want to get into troubles, Yeah. Lately, because of the pandemic and because we went online, we've been dealing with employers actually across the country more so than ever before. And some employers don't know us, so they refuse to negotiate and things like that. And then we just we sue them in the Osaka Labor Commission. Now, this poor company in, Tokyo or Hokkaido now is coming to Osaka to, try to resolve a problem that could have been resolved very simply on the telephone.
Yeah.
And now they're paying for lawyers and they're paying for the day and the train and the plane. And, so our message is if there's something, we'll talk it through, we'll work it out and we'll fix the problem.
Right. So one of the biggest problems that I've heard about from a lot of friends of mine is the university system in Japan, the university teaching system, because I think it's a law that prevents universities from keeping on temporary staff, or what they call temporary staff, for more than 5 years. So if you are in a company for 5 years, they have to offer you full employment. So that entails, benefits and pension schemes and extra money and cost of living raises and things like that. So there's this kind of musical chairs system where every 5 years, everybody gets up, switches universities and sits back down again for another 5 years. And that's one of the reasons why I held off on getting a master's degree and going the sort of university teacher route, even though I think it would have been it would have been an interesting career for me. I would have loved to be a university teacher, but I gave up on that because of this. I don't want to be searching for a new job every 5 years and having to do all this publishing and everything to stay in the game. So what does the union do about that kind of situation? Do you have any cases with that, or do you have any?
Yes.
Are you pushing to try
actually
a lot of being the case? A
lot of cases like that, actually. And often we have to make a sort of a division here. There's basically, I would say there's three kind of people that work in universities, teachers, right? There's tenured professors who, as we know, are there and they're there forever and ever and ever and ever. Then there's full-time contracted teachers. Then there's part-timers. And a good percentage of our members are part-timers, actually. But we also have a lot of these full-time ones. And there, yes, very much 5 years. And it's not because, and this is where the misunderstanding comes in, it's not because after 5 years they'd have to offer them all these new things and things like that at all, actually. The only thing that changes after 5 years for full-timers and part-timers, one thing only, the contract has no end date. So basically, if you wanted to get rid of someone, there'd be no change in the conditions or the benefits or the pay or anything except for the end date of your contract would be erased.
Okay.
And that's all it is. And so if they want to get rid of you, they can't just say, sorry, it's the end of contract. They want to get rid of you, and they have to say, listen, you punched that kid out that day, and that's not allowed. You can't punch them out, right? Or listen, the schools had a severe crisis in the number of students we have. We're going to have to do a big layoff. And basically, there needs to be a reason at that point after 5 years to terminate someone's employment, full-timers and part-timers. So we do get universities who call people up and say, because of the law, we can't keep you here past 5 years. But that's actually not the case. The law doesn't say you can't keep people after 5 years. The law just says after 5 years, you need to give them an unlimited, that's all we call it, is an unlimited term contract.
Right. And so then that creates the kind of problem that they could get into some kind of legal problem for, for getting rid of someone without due cause.
That's right. That's right. All it forces an employer to do is have a reason to not give employment.
And those reasons might be up for debate. That's not something they can just say whatever they feel like. They have to give a good reason. And if the person feels like it's unfair, then they can argue that in court and it could open the university.
That's right. That's right. But the thing is, see, it's actually, in my opinion, is better than the old way.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the conversation. And I just want to take a quick moment to mention that this podcast is only possible because of the support of JobsinJapan.com. So next time you're looking for a job, check out JobsinJapan.com. There are tons of jobs on there, not only in English teaching, but also software engineering, hospitality, marketing, and consulting, among many others. Most of the jobs on the board do not require any specific level of Japanese, and you can get started in minutes. So next time you're looking for a job, check out JobsinJapan.com. And let's get back to the conversation.
Before this law came into effect, the full-time university teachers, which I think is what you were referring to, yes, they did. They were limited to 5 years or 3 years, and they were, put on to the next job and put on to the next job. And that was a lot of the way the university just sort of, ran to a point where, this is sort of the line. After this, it's going to be harder, so a lot of those jobs still are 5 years and 10 years.
Yeah.
So there is it's really complicated actually, because there's
because I read on the union website that there are a few cases that you have open with universities now where they're not dealing with their teachers in a sort of good faith way. So there was one I'd like you to tell me a little bit about is the Doshisha Daigaku. I wonder, because it seemed like they had a limit on the part-time teachers' employment. They were doing 9 years, which seems like a lot longer, but there was a reason that they were trying to do that. What was that about?
There's 5 years, and then you can apply for an unlimited term contract is across the whole country. Any employer, any contract type, anybody can do it. And that was the Democratic Party of Japan, when they were in office, brought that law in. Before the law started to take effect, the LDP had won the next election, and the universities were going crazy thinking, 40-50% of our teachers are part-timers. We never meant for them to be, these regular employees. So what they did is they said that in the universities, there can be an exception for 10 years. But that exception depended on these people being covered under 2 different laws, and which I'm not going to go into, but basically they're people that were hired for a research project of some sort. And let's face it, most of the people that probably me and in the universities aren't hired to do any kind of research. They're teaching, right? But what the universities did is they took this small exception and said, oh, it's a university, so it applies to everybody. So they've applied and they said it's 10 years. Now, Doshisha has gone one step further. They said, not only do you have to work here 10 years before you get an unlimited term contract, anybody hired after 2017 or 2018, I can't remember which one it is now, they can only work for 9 renewals.
Okay. So they're basically putting a hard limit on employees staying. Yeah.
That's right. So now the ministry, and some places are doing this with 5. They're saying you can have 4 renewals and then you're out, right? The ministry has now set up a subcommittee to look at this problem, because it undermines the law, right? The law was to bring job stability to people in precarious work. So, Doshisha has come across that. Now, I think a place like Doshisha, even though we're having troubles with them, I think they're a respected institution. And I think at some point they are going to realize they can't do it.
Right, because there's too much reputation that they can lose over this. It's not something, it would affect their ability to hire future teachers and to hire quality teachers in the future. And
Yes.
it makes me wonder as well, like with the unions and what you're able to do, can that really help more with sort of bigger companies that have a reputation to lose, rather than like the smaller schools, which maybe they don't, they only have a local reputation, and it wouldn't be a big problem if they were in the media with, people picketing, or I don't know, they wouldn't really have that because there wouldn't be enough teachers there to
Yeah. I don't know. I think I deal with an equal amount of unreasonableness even from the bigger employers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the smaller universities are any more unreasonable. Sometimes they're more reasonable, sometimes they are unreasonable, but the big places are also like that. So I really find that universities are bureaucracy.
Right.
They're not a private company with a boss who says, okay, let's do it like this. They're a bureaucracy, and it takes them ages to deal with this. I'll give you an example at one university, and I'm not going to give the name, but at one university, they brought in, basically they're saying you cannot get an unlimited term contract after 5 years, you have to wait 10. But they know that's crazy. They know that doesn't work. And often personnel and the education departments don't agree. And personnel, because they know the laws, often are thinking, you can see them in negotiations, the personnel people. Sometimes you can just see them shaking their heads thinking, what's the education department talking about? But at this university, basically, they gave us a letter saying, okay, it's 10 years. That's what our working rules say. Please understand, we just can't change these willy-nilly and easily. But your members have been here a long time. We're not going to get rid of them. And they will go over the 10-year mark. So don't worry about it. And at some point, we will change the rule. Waited. Finally, their Rijikai, their board of directors, has changed the rule.
Yeah.
And now they have to consult with each department. So it's a mass bureaucracy. So sometimes when we win sort of on the, hey, don't worry about it. We're not going to sign an agreement, but don't worry about it. It's often like that. And I know people can't see me do this, but speaking out of the side of their mouths, right?
Right, exactly. So, but I wonder as well, because so I've only been a member of a union when I was teaching at an international school in Tokyo, and the union was it was just something that on the day that we came in, they're just like, sign this and pay whatever it is, and you'll be in the union, and we've fought for wage increases, and we'll help you if there's any problems with your holidays and things like that. But I'm sure in a lot of places where membership of a union isn't sort of part of the onboarding process, that some companies might be against having their staff join unions. And I know they wouldn't admit this because it's illegal to try and stop people from joining a union. But they would be against their staff joining a union. Is there any truth to that? And can you avoid sort of issues with that?
I've never yet dealt with a company who said on the private side, who said, oh, great, we have a union now. I've yet to hear that in 26 years. But most places, while they're not happy that they have to deal with us, they end up having to deal with us. And, you get places like, ECC in Berlitz, who we have a long 30-year relationship with.
Right.
Who, at ECC, we go to the orientation. And we have 15 minutes to talk about the union. Union membership is not required, but if you join the union, they check off your union dues through your pay. Berlitz is the same way. We have boards, all these things that recognize us. And employees feel, they feel, oh, okay, well, I guess the union isn't some sort of, underground cell organization, and they feel comfortable joining, right?
Right.
But in smaller employers, or where there's not a good relationship, there is often I'm going to get fired if I join. And I'll tell you this, I can't say it doesn't happen, because it happened to me, right, at Geos back in the day. But that was in the beginning of the union. That's when things were like, we were fighting just to survive, just to be allowed to have a union back then.
Right.
But I get more calls from non-union members who've been fired than from union members ever who get fired because they're in the union. Most employers don't do it because it's not worth it.
That makes sense.
And A union like the general union, it's not based on one employer. You can't really kill it because, okay, you get it out of your company for 5 years, but then it's still alive at the other companies. So it just comes back, you know. I hate to compare it to cockroaches, but it sort of is like that, right? You know,
Yeah.
you can't get rid of them because they're in your neighbor's house.
Mm-hmm.
So most employers don't make, most employers, the last thing they want to do is fight with us.
Right, right.
They're busy. They're busy. They're running a company, trying to sell things, you know. For us, when we get busy in a strike or labor commission, well, that's our job. That's what we do. When they get busy doing that, it takes away from their, from their work.
Right, because I'm curious about that. Because do you actually organize things like? So I'm just thinking of it in my British mindset of it, which is the sort of like the picket line kind of thing. Do you organize things like picketing, or do you try and drum up sort of maybe like strikes or things like that in order to, I don't know, have like wage increases or better conditions?
Yeah, we do things like that too. It's just,
how does that work, especially with things like ALT dispatch companies? Because I know there's a lot of issues with ALT dispatch companies, like underpaying and salaries not raising for I don't know, decades now. Like when I came to Japan, I think I was making 250,000 yen a month doing the basic ALT job,
and now they're getting less.
You'd be lucky to get that now. I think there's a lot of companies that are paying a lot less, and it's 9 years later. So
I would say ALTs is a different beast onto its own, and we finally have come up with a sort of a strategy to deal with ALTs, and we've realized this is not going to get done one dispatch company at a time and one board of education at a time. It's going to get done only through a dialogue with the central government, which we've started. Okay. And we've put together now a committee. It's called a New Deal for ALTs, and we realize that we're not strong enough in any one company. And we're not strong enough in any one board. You imagine a board of education, direct hire. There's 4 teachers. They go on strike. So what?
Yeah.
They'll get the regular teachers to teach the class that way anyways. And the kids will say, where were you yesterday? Were you sick? We're not going to win that way. We're only going to win through a national campaign to improve those working conditions. And basically in the end, to remove the dispatch companies out of public education, because they shouldn't be there, On the other end, on places like, companies where it's, the traditional language schools. Oh yeah. When there's strikes, there's pickets, there's the whole, like a normal functioning union, So at many places, we've never ended up having to go on strike.
Right.
And some places we go on strike.
Right, because it also seems that so from my perspective as a former ALT, it seems like a big part of the problem is the Board of Education. They have a system of the lowest bid kind of system where and I had the dispatch company I was working for. I don't know if they had a slightly higher bid, but we lost a lot of contracts the second year I was there, and my contract disappeared because they didn't bid low enough, and someone else bid lower, and they could pay their teachers lower and get the contract. So
it's very much, that's the problem. And we tell the dispatch companies, listen, we know that the pressure that you're under to cut the cost to get the bid, because if you don't get the bid, well, you're out, right? And a lot of board of education, some board of education don't always take the lowest bid, but a lot do. Mm-hmm. And all it does, and this is one of the conversations we're having with the central government, it just drives down wages and working conditions and things like shakai hoken, which are very expensive, the health and pension, right? Mm-hmm. Very expensive. And let's face it, if you're a company and you don't have that obligation because you can keep people on a 29.5-hour contract, then you can outbid, right? But now what's going to happen from October, companies with 101 plus employees working 30 plus hours have to enroll at 20 hours. That means the biggest dispatch company, who we won't say their name, but we know who they are, the biggest dispatch company who we have a relationship with, whether it's good or it's bad or whatever, we have a long relationship with them and we can talk with them. What are they going to do? Yeah. They're going to have to put people in health and pension. And, that means some fly-by-night dispatch companies, and they exist, it has a chance to steal work off them, basically. Mm-hmm. So fighting individual dispatch companies or individual boards of education is just, that strategy won't work.
Right.
We can solve problems like, Bobby fell down in the job and broke his leg, and they didn't do the workers' compensation stuff correctly. Mary can't get paid holidays. Yeah, that stuff we can fix. But the underlying condition of the poor pay, the lack of benefits, the very precarious nature of the work,
right?
We can't solve through individual negotiations with companies. It's not going to happen that way. There are 20,000 ALTs in Japan. You know that?
Yeah, that's quite a lot.
20,000. And JETS is this
right
tiny. Oh, sorry, no one can see me do this. JETS is a small group.
Yeah, people should check out the video podcast where we have on YouTube so that people can see that's how many. It's a very small number of jets, and yeah, we could get into the jet thing another time, but a thing that I really want to talk with you about is Nova and how that happened, because I had a lot of friends who, it was I think it was the year I came to Japan or the year before I came to Japan, but I had a lot of friends who had been affected by that, who'd lost their jobs, who had been given the runaround, like had the company tell them, oh yes, we're trying to pay you, please give us your bank details again because there's been a problem with our system and blah blah blah, and then they end up screwing over a lot of people. So did you work on that, or did you know people who did work on that, and how did that go down?
Yes, we worked on that, and it was probably outside of COVID, it was probably the busiest time ever in the union's history. We beat that with COVID, but it was nuts. We were leaving the office in the middle of the night every night. The press was there all the time. They would call first thing at 6 o'clock in the morning to see what was going on. It is the largest consumer bankruptcy in the post-war period. People were left with telling us, I can't eat. I can't, I'm getting kicked out of my apartment. And, we would be negotiating with what was left of the company at that time to keep people in their apartments. It was crazy. And the only thing I can say is that when wages start coming late, it is never, ever, ever, ever a good sign. I've never, ever seen it end except in tears. When that happens. People say, well, no, they're just late this month. And I'm saying, no. A company that cannot pay wages, even for 1 month, is in a danger zone. There's danger is flashing now, right? And we saw from 1995 or 93, 92 to the Nova bankruptcy, we saw a whole mess of bankruptcies. 2 big companies, Nova, and then another company that many people don't know about, Toza, but was actually a national company at that time. Some smaller companies that were big in the day went bankrupt. So we have a lot of experience in the bankruptcy, and it was chaos. And then at the end, we were able to negotiate with the receiver and the new company to make sure that people who wanted to go back could go back. And we were actually able to get a lot of people their jobs back, which was nice. And, we made sure that people knew how to, we ended up doing it ourselves, basically making sure that the pay was covered through the government pay protection plan in bankruptcies and things like that. We were able to do all those things. And luckily, by the time Geos went bankrupt 3 years later, we didn't get a call. Not even one person called us. The company did it all correctly. No one wanted scandal in the industry anymore. It was done in a very organized fashion.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy because I saw it when it went under, and I thought, oh my God, we're gonna get. And I had just suffered a spinal cord injury, and I was in rehab, and I thought, oh my God, we're gonna get all these calls. They're gonna come in. How are we gonna deal with it all? Not one. Went all off smoothly. I think everyone understood the industry had suffered enough, because it puts a stink on everybody, right?
Right.
So
yeah. Well, anyway, I think we've got to wrap up now. So I want to say thank you so much for coming in here. There's so much useful information for people. Where can people find out more if they're interested in either joining a union or finding out what their rights are and things like that? Where can people go to find out more about that?
They can go to our website, generalunion.org. And basically on there's a lot of information about, a lot of topics and a lot of workplaces, a lot of companies are on our website. We name everybody usually, right? So you can find out stuff there. And if you need a consultation, there is a consultation button there. You just press it and it comes to us, or you can just join.
That's incredibly useful. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I think there's a whole load of things that, we could go over, but, the website is the place to start. That will give you all the information.